but it doesn't have this flexibility, which is especially good if you didn't plan out your league starter. Maybe you didn't have time to, maybe you want to play a new skill and you don't know what's going on, right? You can always redo your sockets. With some of the other options on this list, maybe you're not as lucky. If you want a red socket instead of a green socket, that could cost you a ton of chromatic orbs or even Val orbs. Another big upside for Tabby is for spellcasters or damage over time builds, the kind of things that scale really well with +2 gem levels, which I maybe should actually put here. You can easily get that +2 on a Tabula Rasa because people are just corrupting it randomly. Maybe they're finding it randomly from a divination card. And for a lot of those skills, +2 usually means around about 20 to 24% more damage, which at that point would mean it's basically a 7-link. But next up, let's talk about something a little bit more spicy, which is corrupted 6-links. Now, corrupted 6-links have a lot of upsides and a lot of downsides. The biggest upside is you actually get stats on it. Now, you might not think much of this because it's just a little bit of life, right? But you really have to think about the whole picture. This random resistance right here could really fix your gear. Your gear is not going to be perfect. You're coming out of, I don't know, campaign or white maps, and you really have to scrounge to get capped and still have enough damage. And at some point, you also have to get spell suppression, right? Basically, everything on here is somehow useful. Hell, even that little bit of extra evasion can completely carry your survivability sometimes because you just have very low survivability usually on league start. So getting you stats is especially huge. Also, if you need spell suppression, this is going to be a huge source. You obviously need an evasion base for that. Now, a thing is, usually you're not going to get the perfect colors for what you want. You can obviously search for it, but you think that you're going to get the right colors and decent mods is very unlikely. So sometimes you have to actually recolor, which is going to cost you extra chromatic orbs, extra Val orbs, which can actually result in you paying a lot more than you anticipate. What does that mean? That means you're not very flexible with your build if you have to buy this, because you're not going to change colors very often. So if you're like, okay, I want to try out this new support gem, maybe it's better than the other one. Well, first you'll probably have to spend, I don't know, like 50 chromatic orbs and 50 Val orbs. So that's pretty rough. But if you actually did the work, you planned out your build before on POV, you know exactly what you want. This is probably the best option on this list in general. Another downside though, if you don't have your build planned out and you have to resell because you kind of regret it, which is probably still cheaper than spending a ton of chromatic orbs and Val orbs, it's going to be really hard to resell. You have to think about other people who have the same struggle as you. They would need exactly the same colors as you do. They would need to exactly the same resistances or whatever's on there. So it's just pretty hard to resell. And also, the prices of corrupted 6-links makes extremely hard in the first place. Next up, let's go over tainted or refusing. These are probably the most confusing, especially for people who didn't play Scourge. Now, in 3.16, when these corrupted currencies were released, it was incredibly easy to do this because tainted or refusings drop basically everywhere. And nowadays with Beyond rework, I will say this, it's usually still cheaper than 6-linking or refusings even at league start. However, not by a lot, and you still have to corrupt your body armors, but there's still very, very good use cases for this. And obviously I can't account for like drop rate changes, or I don't know, maybe there's other uses for orb refusings, so they're gonna get more expensive, so it's back to tainted orb refusings. However, they're usually cheaper than orb refusings. Now, easy corruption with beast crafting. Now, what I mean with this, I'm going to show you in a second. We're actually going to make an item from scratch so I can show you. And on average, all you have to know is it takes 4 tainted orb refusings to 6-link a chest. Now, the best use case for tainted orb refusings usually is corrupted chests that have +2 levels. Now, you can get a ton of different +2 levels. It can be +2 duration, AoE, projectile, or just +1 level of all socketed gems, right? And these are very easily corruptible if you just throw Val orbs on a lot of them. And this is very helpful for bases that are extremely common, like, for example, Cherubims or Belly of the Beast. Or I think the other example that I had was like Soul Mantle, stuff like that, right? Very cheap stuff that drops very often, because this +2 is basically like a 7-link. And this is, once again, mostly huge for spellcasters or damage over time builds. So as an example right here that I'm going to show you, I bought a Cherubims from trade for 20 Chaos that has +2 level of socketed projectile skill gems, which, for example, is incredibly good for Toxic Rain. Now, if you already have 6 sockets, there's a lot already done, so definitely look out for those on trade. But if you don't, you're just buying it like this, raw. What you have to do is you go here, and first up you craft on 4 sockets. So if you don't know, the way Tainted Jewelers and Tainted Fusings work is whenever you apply it, you have a 50% chance to either upgrade one link or one socket, or 50% chance to downgrade one. For example, right here, we're just going to try with the Tainted Jeweler. We got to 5 sockets, which is very lucky, and now we have another 50-50 to win. And we got the 6 sockets, so 2 on average. Usually it's around about 4. Now, Tainted Jewelers are usually not that expensive, though. They drop a lot more frequently than the Tainted Orb of Fusings. So now here's the hardest part. We do a 4-link right here, which is basically the best outcome. 4-link sockets. And what you do now is you basically have the same thing over and over again. It's a 1 in 4 chance to get it from 4 to 6 links, because from 4 to 5 is a 50-50, and then from 5 to 6 is a 50-50 again. Let's try our first one right here. We hit the 5 link, which is nice, and now we have another 50-50. Alright, in this case, we actually went back to a 4 link. So, third Tainted Orb of Fusing. Let's try again. We're back to 5 link, and back to 4 link, and now we have 3 links. So in this case, we got unlucky. Let's do 4 linked sockets again right here. Alright, 50-50 again, 5 link, 50-50 again. This time we got the 6 link. I think that was 7 in total. Obviously, sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't get lucky. Last league actually only used 2, so it's obviously RNG based. But if you want a chest like this, which actually can carry you all the way through red maps, I would say other than Skin of the Swords, this is most likely something like this.
That's the first one I died on. How does that? What happens? Okay, yeah, please.
Tainted Orb of Fusings are kind of risky on stuff like rare chests, because you would have to corrupt first and you would have to brick it. However, there's an easy way to do this. This is especially important for stuff like, I don't know, 6-linked unique weapons or something. You can easily do the 30% quality beast right here. So that is this beast right here, the Crykick Vassal. That gives you automatically 30 quality and corrupts the item. However, the corruption cannot brick the item. It simply just gets the corrupted hack. Now, if you 6-link like this, what I would definitely tell you to do is, before you try anything with Tainted Orb of Fusings, 6 socket before you corrupt, and then 5-link before you corrupt. Because if you 5-link before, you have a 50-50 right off the gates. You don't have to get from 4 to 5 links first. Straight up, roll for a 5-link. Sometimes you even get the lucky 6-link already, and you're done. But if you get the 5-link, do that before. Also, just in case this was a little bit too confusing for you, I wrote it up real quick so you can make a screenshot and then do this. Next up, we have Divination cards. Divination cards are a huge source of 6 links for people, especially good in solo self-found, where you can't just go to trade and buy corrupted 6-link. Now, there's a few ones that are better than others, but the number one cheap alternative here is the Chains That Bind, which I want to highlight. Now, this can only go up to level 80. Now, in case you didn't know, if it doesn't specify any level here, it will basically go with your character level, but only up to level 80. Now, not going higher than level 80 is especially bad if you're something like an energy shield base, because they usually want higher numbers, so you're going to have to get something else. You also can't roll up your spell suppression. For something like that, you would need Dapper Prodigy. It's basically the same as Chains That Bind, just that it is item level 100, but obviously also a lot more expensive. Another cool one is Porcupine. I use this a lot of my Explosive Arrow Ballista build. It is very cozy to get. It's extremely good in dot fields, because +2 levels on a bow does not require high item level, and you can basically force stuff on it with an essence. Because essences, and I want to remind you that for the Chains That Bind as well, don't care about the item level. They will always apply what the essence says it applies. If you don't need spell suppression and you're fine with a armor energy shield base, you can also go for Emperor of Purity. They're usually pretty cheap. The rest are maybe not used as much, but I'm quickly go over them. Draped in Dreams, right? We have Immortal Resolve. Some of them are pretty rare. Imperial Legacy, if you really want to go with an Imperial Bow, it's usually not the best choice, even though you can probably farm them up pretty quickly. Celestial Justicar, Astral Plates have fallen a little bit out of favor, because the Implicit doesn't do that much anymore, because we now have Eldritch Implicits, but Celestial Justicar is still totally fine. Dark Mage can be really strong on a staff build, but usually on most casters you want to go with Shield Charge, so you can. But if this is fine with you, then Dark Mage is going to be exceptionally cheap for 6-link. The problem with Ethereal, once again, is it doesn't...
I think I know I'm taking so much damage. Other amulet I got.
So, yeah, Baba Regalia is very item level dependent. That's unfortunate. But for a League starter, it's still totally fine if it's cheap. This is usually way too expensive. We have Warlord, Coronal Maul, not used that often. Next up, we have Bad Bases. Now, this basically rewards you for playing off-meta builds. This is usually 6-link that people just don't really care about. This is especially strong on stuff like melee, because two-handers and because you don't need your 6-link on your body armor, that can give you very easy options like, I don't know, Abalic, 6-link, and stuff like that. And also staff spellcasters, as we talked about earlier. There's a divination card, but people are also going to hand that in and then just list it very cheaply. So definitely look out for that if you're using a staff. And the thing that everybody should keep in mind is weak body armor bases. For example, if I wanted an assassin's garb, it would be very pricey to get a 6-link of that. Now we're talking uncorrupted this time, so you can craft it however you want, which is very valuable for a ton of builds. But if you just go for an Eelskin tunic, which has a lot less evasion, you can save so much money, right? And the thing why this is important is not every build always scales evasion, not every build always scales armor, so sometimes you can get a very, very cheap deal. Also, at the same time, you can craft however you want. You can actually get stats. It kind of has both the upsides from a corrupted 6-link and a tabula rasa. Also, these bad bases usually don't have as much dexterity or intelligence strength requirement, which means it's easier to off-color them. And then real quickly at the end, off-meta unique 6-links are also something you should always check. If you have any unique in your build that you think might be off-meta, always check if people actually just drop them, right? Sometimes they drop them from Baal Temple's 6-link, sometimes they drop them from a certain league mechanic, and if nobody plays a build with it, well, then at some point they're going to price it down, and you get really, really quick. That's basically all I got. Maybe you could learn a tip or two right here. Maybe it's going to make the league start a little bit easier. I hope everybody has a good league start. Thanks a lot once again for my Twitch and my YouTube supporters. I could do stuff like this without you. Thank you so much for the support. And yeah, since I still don't have a slogan. See you next time.
Hi. I think one more level now to swap. I wonder if we can. What's.
Oh no!
I'll check out the build properly once we level up.
Hi, this is Rain here with another video for the upcoming Crucible League, and this is Full Dot Elementalist. An absolute powerhouse, and has been for quite some time now. Hardcore players might be a little bit worried about the fact that it is an Elementalist. Obviously, physical mitigation is not the best on this, so if you're looking for an incredibly tanky build, look somewhere else. Now, if you're a softcore player and you're thinking, wow, am I gonna die lows on this? It is actually quite tanky. scoring around 6.3k life, like 1000 energy shield or close to it, and you have the elemental egg. So it is actually incredibly tanky, and you do have spell suppression, but physical mitigation is definitely going to benefit from things like Taste of Hate. So for playing this build, it's really cool that you can have Vortex on the left click. Click the move in place thing, and you're basically running while casting Vortex. So everything that gets close to you is going to die. We also have Creeping Frost and Cold Snap, and you could use just Cold Snap for clearing, probably will be enough. When you need damage, you want to try to keep a Vortex, Creeping Frost, and Cold Snap on the boss. As while multiple Vortexes, the damage doesn't stack, but the damage from each individual full damage spell, the damage over time will stack from that. So that's how we're going to play at the endgame. And if you feel like it's too many buttons, you could 6-sync your Vortex and just forgo the Creeping Frost, but you will lose a lot of damage. But if you feel like it's too click intensive, this could actually be a really unclick intensive build just by having Vortex on mouse button 1. If you're less mobile or you don't have two hands, this is a great choice for that because you need to run around. Righteous Fire would be even better for that purpose. If watching these videos helps you have a good league start, please consider subscribing to the channel as it helps me and my team a lot. So for those that haven't followed one of my guides before, it's a normal step-by-step guide, so it's very easy to see where you're putting points a lot of the time, and ascendancies are also baked into it. Bandits and things like that is in config up here. And an important thing to note for this guide is that you can see in the bottom left that it says developer mode. The reason for that is Path of Building hasn't been fully updated yet. It should be updated before launch, so I would just wait until it actually loads in your normal POB with an update. And if it doesn't load before league start or the day before league start, we're going to post new versions in the description, which will be using the old POB and just assuming the new skill tree. It should be updated fast enough that I don't want you guys bothering with downloading the dev mode. In the skills, it is very step-by-step as well. You can see that you start out leveling with like Freezing Pulse and Frost Bomb. Each thing is grouped into different categories so that you don't end up with too many skills and you see easily what you can rock at each level. In the items, it's the same thing. We've grouped it up so you can see what is good early, and then early game, mid game, end game, etc. The number one stat you can get for this build is cold damage over time multiplier. So a lot better than just spell damage or cold damage. An important thing to explain for this build is I have Malice. Nearby enemies have 50% increased fire and cold resistance. And I would assume that a new player is going to be really confused why we're using that on our build. But when we're cursing and using the cold exposure on enemies, if something has minus 20%, it's actually going to be increased 50%, so that would put it at minus 30, I think, because math is hard. So it will increase it negatively. With all the curses and stuff, end up something being minus 50, minus 60. This is going to do a lot of extra damage, and that's what makes it so strong. Very, very cool interaction. In the non-armor version, because this doesn't have any armor and we're going to get a lot of large fist hits, we have Dawnbreaker, because we have cold and lightning and physical damage taken as fire. You particularly want the physical damage taken as fire to be high. And a Taste of Hate is really good as well. These are particularly tank-related things, so if you're on softcore, it's not the thing you need to prioritize the most, especially because we are chilling and freezing bosses. So when they are chilled, they are going to attack less fast, and it'll be easier to dodge than for other builds. But that is definitely the hole in the build's tank, so keep that in mind. That in mind, we do have extra info in the FAQ. So, for example, if you're having mana issues, this will tell you how to solve it. If you want to have less buttons, etc. So a little extra help there for those that need it. I think that's really important to note for this build is while Hold.Dot always looks like it has pretty low damage on paper, with a lot of testing, people found that it actually could end up having more damage than even builds that have up to twice as much damage on paper. But because of the way it works with placing down damage, and if the boss is leaving outside of that zone, you're not doing any damage anymore. Builds like this have such a big advantage because we can have so much uptime. It's very easy to make sure that the boss is pretty much always standing in your damage, and that is a huge advantage for this build. While the damage is only showing 4 or 5 million DPS, it actually does feel quite high, and it ends up being an incredibly nice build to play. The one thing that's kind of neat this league is that there's a new life mastery. 15% max life if there are no life modifiers on equipped body armor. So if you manage to roll a really nice chest like this, but that has no life on it, but instead a lot of armor, you do end up solving a little bit of the armor issue on the build, and you can still pick up 15% increased life. It is slightly less than a really high life roll, but you get a lot of armor. So it is actually quite nice, and you have more options. So I hope this video helps you have a great time in the upcoming Crucible League. Thank you guys so much for watching. Sub if you liked the video, but more importantly, try to die
Less than I do. He's got to die a lot at the start as well, because he's got Crusader before he can push the Crucibles.
Hi, Scissorin here with another video, and I just tried the Druid, and I'll make a video about everything about the Druid, but the Druid started pointing out some problems in Diablo 4 that wasn't as apparent with a lot of the other classes, and especially with the new information, legendaries are increased drop rate for the beta. So that means that you will not be decked out in full legendaries by 25, and that pretty much changes everything, because that means that it's going to make a lot bigger difference when you actually get them. So with that in mind, I was playing, and first off, resource generation on Druid and Farm is really, really bad. It's also extremely weird on Druid how you can hit like debris, barrels, and stuff like that, and suddenly you're gaining resources. But you're not gaining resources by regenerating. But hitting a barrel is okay. Or a deer. You're a Druid. You can kill a deer to get some more resources. Very Druid-like. Obviously the last one is more of a joke, but resource generation felt really weird. And I've gone into Diablo 4, and with everything they're saying, they are aiming for a more casual audience. They've said that the skill tree is very on purpose to be more simple, because they want it to be an easy game to get into. But here's where I started having a problem. That's all well and good, but there's several things in the game that is not catered to more casual players. There's a few things that are really, really big issues. So first off, the resource generation and cooldown. Either is fine, but they do such a big combination of both, and it really sets apart skills that don't have either. For example, Corpse Explosion I think is done really well. It has no cooldown, no resource cost, and the only limitation, which ends up being the resource cost, is corpses being there, which you have a lot of different ways to generate. So Corpse Explosion ends up being really good and sets itself apart so much. Now you have a lot of other skills that some have insane cooldowns, some have cooldowns and resource costs. There is this like insane amount of either something has a crazy long cooldown, or it's so extremely cost that you can only cast it 2 or 3 times. We do see that we have things on items like resource cost reduction, etc. It does feel a little bit extreme early. Obviously, I can't speak about the endgame. This is only level 25. The reason I want to make this video is that I hope by giving feedback, and if a lot of people talk about it, that they'll be like, okay, this is definitely something that isn't in the endgame. We don't have to worry about it from Blizzard's point of view. Like, this doesn't become a problem later, and then that's all fine, right? Then all my complaints are irrelevant. Or that they're like, man, that is a really good point. If people are feeling like this is level 25, and they know that it doesn't get better in the endgame, then they maybe should think about doing something. Because the main important thing is that people have fun, and that the game is accessible and easy for the majority of people. And the fact that Barb not only doesn't regenerate its resource, but it degenerates it. Which, if you've been out of combat a few seconds, you start losing your reach. That feels really bad. So Barb and Druid just has awful resource generation. Another thing, this is just straight up anti-casual. The respec cost. So the respec cost goes up the more you do it, but it goes up permanently. Apparently this is intentional, where they have said that at some point they want people to make a new character instead of respecting permanently. That is okay and all well and good as a philosophy, but I don't think it goes very well over with a more casual audience, where generally, especially more casual players, aren't even on Twitch, they aren't on YouTube, they aren't checking build guides, and they want to experiment and play around with different things. At least like on a basic level. I'm not talking about making advanced builds here. I'm just saying, what is that ability like? What is that ability like? And this really prevents that when eventually your gold cost will become so big that you have to make a new character and never goes down. Somebody said that it'll go down between seasons, but obviously that is only a thing for the people that are playing non-ladder. If you are respecing a lot in a season on an active character, you will at some point. Okay, well now it's 1.2 million gold to respec one node. It's time to make a new character. So I definitely prefer Last Epoch respec system there, being incredibly new player friendly, and you can respec at any time with no cost, and you just have to very quickly level back the skill up, and that goes very fast. It just seems a little bit at odds with making a more simple casual game. A lot of the characters early aren't, especially with legendaries being increased drop rate, going to really give the same power fancy that I think a lot of people are expecting. There is such a large percentage that love Diablo 3 for this. Now, Diablo 3 is my least favorite ARPG because it tells you what to play, it's incredibly easy, and it is just the entire power fancy of just right-clicking down monsters. But there are so many people that love that, and a lot of people want Diablo 4 to be that. They don't necessarily want it to be a struggle. They don't want low pack size, like the density we saw, and obviously I can't talk about leaked content, but we have seen some of that too. It doesn't look great for the power fancy of just mowing down monsters. A lot of what we've seen, it's a lot more like specific and more thought out, like, okay, this zone has some monsters, but now you're not seeing a monster for like a minute or so. And that also seems a little bit at odds to me. So while there's a lot of things that I'm like, yeah, this is very clearly designed for more simplistic play or more casual players, there are some things that just seems incredibly at odds at it. So by sort of being like dancing between these lines and not necessarily in a good way, I'm just wondering, who will Diablo 4 end up being for? I want games to be very, very different from each other. It's cool if they take some things, I don't mind that. But I want Last Epoch, Diablo 4, and Path of Exile to be very strong identities and very different so that people have more choice. And I was expecting it to be Diablo 4 will be the most casual one for casual players, very easy, gives you the
Hop
power
in,
fancy,
fuck a
gives
white,
you the
and then
hack
you can
and
move
slash.
on. Or come
And
back
then
or
you have
whatever.
Last Epoch somewhere in the middle, and you have Path of Exile for the people that, you know, you shut out the light, you really sit there for 16 hours calculating out your build, and you really want that complexity, you want that insane endgame, etc. And having the choice between those three would be so great, but I'm starting to wonder, is that going to be Diablo 4? Honestly, it's just something we're going to have to wait and see. I just want to make this video, get people talking about it a little bit. What do you think? Do you think I'm onto something? Do you think I'm stupid? Keep in mind, this is only a level 25 beta, and we don't have the full game. I've never had access to the endgame beta or anything, so I know nothing about it, aside from leaks that we're seeing on Reddit and stuff. One thing that's so scary to me about the legendary items with the reduced drop rate, it basically becomes the problem I have with sets, at least. Well, there aren't sets because it is one item. The problem I have with sets is that it homogenizes gear and tells you what skill to play in Diablo 3. But it definitely will end up telling you what skill to play. So I would rather like to see that either it has an impact on multiple skills or multiple things. I would love to see the removal of the damage increase, because just changing something in a neat way is already, or should already be, the exciting part of the legendary. When it both affects the way it plays, and not in a negative way, and triples your damage, then it kind of ends up being a no-brainer. Now, hopefully at the endgame, when we do have a lot of legendaries, you end up the choice between a lot of these different skills, but I am a little bit worried about seeing in this early 25 demo that some skills are so much ahead of others, regardless of even having legendaries. As soon as you unlock Chain Lightning, Fireball, Frozen Orb, Chain Lightning is just miles ahead of everything else by default. Another thing that is very dated and I hope gets fixed before launch of Diablo 4 is the dungeon design. Obviously, a lot of the bosses are just reused. So if you're jumping between several dungeons, sometimes you'll just see the exact same boss that you just fought. That's pretty lame. A lot of the designs of the dungeons themselves are very like tedious and mazy and not necessarily fun to go through. But the number one thing that is really bad is there are some dungeons that you have to kill every single monster down to the last one in an area before you're able to progress. And sometimes on top of this, that also has that you need to pick up every single essence that monster drops. These are like super outdated concepts from like year 2000 that generally nearly every other ARPG is solved by having, well, you only need to kill 90% and then you can progress. Or if it is kill everything, it's a very, very linear zone where you're very unlikely to actually have to go back. So, very, very weird concepts that I hope get fixed between now and launch. Another thing that ends up being really frustrating is obviously the level scaling. I've talked about this a lot in previous videos, but it also became a lot more noticeable than the Druid. And one thing that I really felt is destroying the game for me is every single time I level up, my character becomes weaker and not stronger. This is basically super reverse of any other ARPG. You only feel stronger when you get a huge power spike in item or you unlock some sort of big combo. Other than that, you actively feel punished, and not in a small way, you feel it every single level that you are getting punished whenever you level up. And that is very rough. A lot of the other classes were so overpowered in comparison to the Druid that you don't feel it as much. But on Druid, it feels even worse than what Oblivion felt like. An important thing to remember, even if they don't nail it at launch, they have said that they are going to be doing beefy league updates. And every time I talk about that on stream, people sadly say copium. But you do have to remember, Blizzard is very a for-profit company, and we see very clear reasons for why they
How
themselves
does it work?
would have a
Okay.
big reason to make sure that the seasons are beefy. That is why I feel that it's a lot less copium. They're gonna be selling cosmetics. They're gonna be selling the battle pass. Whereas like previous things like Diablo 3, you just have to hope that new players are buying the game. So they're a lot less incentivized to actually have big updates outside of expansions, which is no longer the case. So yeah, I do think that there is a good chance that we will get beefy updates because of the financial incentive. Either way, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts below. This is just some of the big concerns I have. So obviously this ends up being a little bit of a, well, it can probably come off as a negative video, but hopefully understand where I'm coming from. And I really want the game to do well and be a great game, especially for champion players. So thanks for watching. Stop if you liked the video, but more importantly, try to die less than I do.
I bet. Why did I put on my own YouTube video?
Because our 3.22 expansion announcement will occur during the ExileCon livestream in late July. Set yourself a reminder to tune in, because we'll also be unveiling massive amounts of information about Path of Exile 2, including revealing the date that its beta will start. Okay, back to today's livestream. Here's what you can expect. We'll start with a trailer for Crucible, followed by a deep dive on the League itself. Then we'll cover this expansion's endgame improvements, including the introduction of Atlas Gateways and revamps to both Breach and Abyss leagues. We'll discuss changes to Path of Exile balance metagame, including changes to the passive skill tree, its masteries, an overhaul of the Saboteur and Pathfinder Ascendancy classes, 9 powerful new battle skills, and some of the new unique items you can build around. After that,
He
we'll
sounds
cover
so sick,
improvements to
poor
the
guy.
and a League launch boss kill event, before diving into the new supporter pack series. The livestream will then conclude with a Q&A session between Ziggy D and me, where we'll answer questions with Twitch chat. After the livestream, we'll drop the full questions. Let's get started with the trailer for Path of Exile Crucible.
Let's go, I'm ready. Gotta shut up during this. Don't do it, you guys. I'm gonna shut up during this.
Hail, one of many. Eons ago, my kind walked the molten surface of this world. Now, we seek a champion.
Oh
We
my.
must endure the heat of the crucible.
Oh, I'm getting goosebumps. Holy shit.
To forge weapons unlike any Greycast has ever seen.
Yo, no way. That's sick. That's so sick. Oh
Take
my
up
god.
the power of the Titans. And bring obliteration.
Oh my god. Oh, that's so sick. Atlas Massive Gateways? Huh? Mastery Overhaul. Oh, okay. Alright. We're going, dude, we're going in. Oh my god. Holy shit. That's so much stuff. Let's fucking go, dude. I'm ready. Woo, baby. Woo, so hyped. So hyped. I'm ready. Dude, let's go. Tell me more. Tell me more, Chris, please. Teach me.
In
Tell
Path
me.
of Exile Crucible, you'll learn about an ancient race of titans who once shared the primordial surface of Rayclass.
I love that. That's
In
so
this
cool.
league, you will earn the ability to forge their power onto your weapons.
Okay, okay.
And what form does that power take? In an iconically Path of Exile way, it's the ability to imbue your weapons with their own passive skill
Oh,
trees.
it's so sick, dude.
These Crucible trees can have quite an impact on your character build. For example, in addition to the regular mods on this bow, its Crucible tree grants additional physical damage, physical to chaos conversion, the Master Fletcher notable passive,
my-
improved grace effect,
That's
and level 10 lesser multiple
That's
projectiles.
so
While
much.
this is certainly a decent tree to get, it's not even the maximum depth and could be even more optimized for your build.
That's so much
In order to
power.
forge these powerful trees onto your weapons, you'll need to complete Crucible
That's
encounters. There's one in each
crazy.
area. Each encounter takes place at a Crucible forge. As you approach the forge, you'll have the choice of which of your equipped weapons you want to focus on. this
Dude,
can
that's
include ones on your
crazy.
alternate weapon swap if you want to improve
Good,
one
good,
you're not
good,
currently
good, good.
using.
Love that, love that.
After
Offhand,
selecting a
good.
weapon, you channel it at the Crucible
Love
forge
that.
to spawn monsters.
Awesome.
The longer you channel for, the more dangerous and rewarding the encounter becomes. As you spawn additional monsters, they combine together to create larger and more fearsome foes that grant even more experience for your Crucible passive tree.
Okay. Oh, so you have to level
Being
it
able
up in
ramp
order
up
to
the
get it.
difficulty of the encounters
Gotcha.
is a double-edged sword. While it gives you the opportunity to make rapid progress on your Crucible weapon crafting projects, it comes with significant risk to your character. It's easy to accidentally overwhelm yourself and make an encounter that is too dangerous. Channel carefully and adapt to what your character is capable of.
What happens
When
if you
first
die?
find a weapon, it
What
doesn't
happens
have a
if you
Crucible
die?
tree unlocked. Channeling that weapon at Crucible encounters will unlock and reveal its tree.
I take a lot less
Allocate
damage now.
your first skill.
Gotcha, gotcha. Good,
You
good,
can
good.
only
There's like a
allocate one skill
growing
to each
length of
tree
it based
depth,
off
so
where
you'll
you are
need
in
to
the
decide
campaign.
which path through the tree is best for your build.
Oh, that's sick.
As you get deeper into a tree, more and more experience is required to unlock skills.
Good,
The
good,
final
good,
depths
good. I
can
like
take
that.
quite an investment and can only be found rarely on endgame items, but also
Good,
have some of the
good.
most powerful properties. For example, this wand has 2 depth 5 skills to choose from. One of them allows all damage from your freezing pulse and Eye of Winter skills of poison, and the other allows various grabs to be attached to your summoned reaper. There are many such modifiers to skills that will enable
Okay, I still get one tapped. I want to test.
That's crazy. I
in
love
addition to
that.
all types of weapons,
That's
shields
nuts.
can also be empowered with their own Crucible trees. Here's a relatively simple low-level example. It
That's
gets a bit crazier as you
nuts.
approach the endgame. Speaking of the endgame, in endgame Crucible encounters,
Please,
you'll
yes, more.
occasionally find
Hit me with
igneous geodes, currency
Okay.
items that can be cracked open to reveal a primeval remnant. This is a map-like item that grants access to the Forge of the Titans, the culmination of your Crucible journey.
Yes,
These
map
primeval
item.
remnants always generate as rare items. Half of their mods are upsides and half are downsides. The
Unmodified.
upsides generally increase the rewards of the area or as special crafting options. For example, causing monsters to drop divination cards or magmatic ore, a form of tradable itemized Crucible tree experience.
Okay.
The downsides are quite punitive compared to most in-game maps.
Right.
Ideally, you want to find a primeval remnant that is really rewarding upsides alongside downsides you can handle. If you don't think you'll survive a visit to the Forge of the Titans, trade the remnant away to someone else and gamble on cracking open another geode.
Good, 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 good.
If you
good.
survive and manage to
Awesome.
reach the end of the area, you'll find the aforementioned forge, which allows you to merge Crucible trees on 2 items together. The way this process works is that you provide 2 items of the same class.
Okay.
For example, a pair of bows, a pair of shields, or a pair of one-hit axes. One of these items will be melted down and applied to the other, which will keep its regular properties.
Okay.
Their
Oh, I
crucible
love
trees
that
will be merged
animation.
together in an unpredictable way, taking elements of each one.
Ooh.
This is a little reminiscent
Okay.
of how recombinators apply to item mods,
Okay.
taking parts of each crucible tree and merging them together, as well as randomly upgrading, downgrading, or mutating skills on the
Enemies in your
resultant
Rage
tree.
Vortex or Blade Storm are hindered
While
and
this process can
unnerved.
create
That's
some really
awesome.
powerful trees if you get skills you wanted from both items. It can also completely wreck your precious trees, so take care choosing which you risk combining.
1 fork, level 1 blind. Sap enemies.
Also, like recombinators, there are ways to manipulate the system to improve your odds at getting certain outcomes. For example, any skills that have been allocated are more likely to show up in the resulting crucible tree.
Oh, okay, that's good. Soul Eater?
By default, you can only add crucible trees to non-unique items. But it's possible to get a mod
Okay.
on the Forge of the Titans map that allows you to imbue a unique item with a crucible tree, which can then be leveled up by a regular crucible.
No way.
To combine crucible trees on unique items together, you'll want to find a crystalline geode and crack it open to reveal the secret higher level version of the Forge of the Titans. I probably shouldn't say too much about it, but it will let you do some interesting things with crucible trees.
Oh my
There's
god.
an important thing to note about crucible trees and unique weapons. In addition to being much harder than the mod, there's a special rule about how they can be combined. A unique weapon must be combined with another copy of the same unique weapon.
Okay,
to
the
merge
exact
trees
same
together.
unique. Good. Okay.
Because this destroys one copy, getting a good crucible tree on a unique weapon makes it insanely valuable. It may also raise the trade value of all unique weapons by quite a lot, as players trying to create perfect crucible trees.
I love this. Oh my gosh, I love
The
this.
crucible has a skill tree with a special skill that indicates that the item will sell to vendors for a specific item in addition to its regular sale price.
Oh?
These vendor skills usually occur relatively deeply in the tree, so take some effort to
Oh.
allocate, but usually they're
Okay.
skill choices you'd make when leveling the item up for use.
That's kind of cool.
The presence of these skills presents you with an interesting choice about whether you want to use the item or sell it to a vendor.
Okay.
And whether you want to spend your crucible experience either revealing new trees to hunt for good skills, leveling up
okay,
items to use,
okay.
or leveling up items to sell.
Right. Good. Okay.
Alright, so level 79. Hi.
Hello everyone, welcome to another build guide. Today I'm bringing you the call.werber. You're gonna be able to find this complete build guide on Maxroll with a complete overview of all the skills, the gearing, etc. Now let's get in game and see some gameplay. As you can see, obviously this is a Werber form, so the most important thing is gonna be to transform, of course, as a Werber. We're gonna press our Q, we're gonna transform, and we're gonna be this mighty boar, and we're gonna start rampaging. As you rampage through the battlefield, you can release your maul to release entangling roots and kill enemies around you. You can also use swipe to buff your damage, and use Warcry to cast maelstorms. As you can see, there's been quite a bit of changes to this build in the recent past, and thankfully, thanks to the buffs to rage generation, you no longer need to invest into Spriggan form for rage or to use any sort of bind generation or rage generation outside of just like what you get from swipe and what you get from just like the Werber form tree. This has made this build being extremely more cozy to play, as you can basically play it as soon as you get entangling roots. You can basically play the build, although the build guide is recommended for level 70 as it includes very detailed gearing and very detailed you know, skill information, etc. Again, feel free to spam your abilities, you know, feel free to spam Warcry, feel free to spam Maul. You will be completely fine when it comes to rage and when it comes to staying in Werber form, of course. You can see we also have a lot of rage generation when hitting rares. So if you see an enemy with a yellow bar, make sure you use it to generate extra rage. Yeah, the build is extremely cozy now. As you can see, there's basically no rage issues as long as you're hitting enemies. And yeah, it's really powerful.
Hello, traveler.
Oh.
Hello, traveler. Hello, traveler. Hello, traveler.
Hi. No, I got that's the process sorted.
Outside roots and kill to transform, of course, as a werber. We're gonna press our Q, we're gonna transform, and we're gonna be this mighty boar, and we're gonna start rampaging. As you rampage through the battlefield as a werber.
Do not dwell on regrets.
We're gonna press our Q, we're gonna transform, and we're
I just want as much health as possible, basically. I have any health on these?
gonna be this mighty boar, and we're gonna start rampaging. As you rampage through the battlefield, you can release your maul to release entangling roots and kill enemies around you. You can also use swipe to buff your damage, and use Warcry to cast maelstorms. As you can see, there's been quite a bit of changes to this build in the recent past. And thankfully, thanks to the buffs to rage generation, you no longer need to invest into Spriggan form for rage or to use any sort of bind generation or rage generation outside of just like what you get from swipe and what you get from just like the Werber form tree.
I haven't already.
Form tree. This has made this build being extremely more cozy to play, as you can basically play it as soon as you get Entangling Roots. You can basically play the build, although the build guide is recommended for level 70 as it includes very detailed gearing and very detailed you know, skill information, etc. Again, feel free to spam your abilities, you know, feel free to spam Warcry, feel free to spam Maul. You will be completely fine when it comes to Rage and when it comes to staying in Werber form, of course. You can see we also have a lot of Rage generation when hitting rares. So if you see an enemy with a yellow bar, make sure you use it to generate extra Rage. But yeah, the build is extremely cozy now. As you can see, there is basically no rage issues as long as you're hitting enemies. And yeah, it's really powerful, really beginner friendly, and I highly recommend it. I'm gonna finish the timeline here, and we can go over to the build to explain a bit how it goes and what it works good with. Alright, we're back on the build guide. You have a brief overview. Like I mentioned, this is meant for level 70, but you know, if you wish to learn the build from scratch and you want to level up a new character, we have a leveling guide for you. A quick thing I want to mention before we keep going.
I was just bugged. Here's how this is. I got stuck. I don't know what though. I think I got enough to make this a bit stronger. I'm basically just getting caught up now. Lethal spines. Will it do? Okay, sweet. Like the goal now isn't the ball thing, it's just for XP right now. So we'll just keep this going. It already seems a lot better than just from getting them perks.
every build in max roll has a loot filter. Make sure to download it. It's very easy. You go here, you go save link as, and you can save the filter and use it on your filter folder instead of last epoch. So let's go over the build really quick and explain what are the pros and the cons. So first we have Werber form, of course, and this ability allows us to generate a lot of rage thanks to invigorating and thanks to frenzied strikes. This will basically allow us to stay on Werber form even when fighting single targets, bosses, etc. For that reason, obviously, we're using an entangling root and woodland bear. It's necessary in order for us to profit. So, of course, spell damage per strength, a core element of scaling the build's damage, and you know the Maelstorms are key for your single target damage. Since we don't need to allocate points on poisonous seeds or rampant growth, we can actually go for a full damage setup on entangling roots. Again, you have complete progression point by point here, so if you happen to find plus skills, etc., this is how you should allocate them, in my personal opinion. Maelstorm, again, this is basically your single target DPS, so you want to grab all the damage possible. You also get the frenzy and the haste, which is very handy while mapping and while single targeting bosses, and make sure you get 60 attunement so you can double the damage that this ability scales with from this node, right? There's this threshold of the 60 attunement. Then we have Warcry. Warcry is key to get obviously the immunity, to get the immunity frames when we Warcry, to get a bit, you know, to immune boss attacks, etc. And Berserk. Berserk is basically a buff that after we use Warcry gives us a lot of attack speed, and that way we can, you know, attack single targets in order to proc the Ursine Storm node inside of Werber that allows us to proc Maelstorms on hit. Again, very classic build. You also generate some Maelstorms when you Warcry, and it's extremely handy. And this is a new change from this patch, but basically Rage Swipe now grants you a global damage multiplier. So the idea for this is that you can actually generate stacks while using Swipe that will proc Maelstorms that also stack Aspect of the Panther that gives you a global damage multiplier, which is obviously extremely amazing because the build didn't have the best single target damage before, and now it's a bit better thanks to other buffs like the Throne of Ambition buff. Again, if you're struggling with Rage, if you have Tears of the Forest, if you just don't want to be looking at your screen and you want to be playing Netflix and stuff, you don't want to min-max the build too much, again, there's some tips for you here in order to generate Rage a bit more cozy, but as I've just displayed on the gameplay, you don't actually need any of this. But again, if you want to go for the extra quality of life, here's what you need to do. But you will lose damage, so keep that in mind. Again, passives, very straightforward. Again, the entire tree tells you exactly what to get. If you want a more detailed explanation on what we're getting what, why we're getting what, just go check just read the guide, you know. It explains pretty much everything on the scaling section of the guide. But you know, some notable notes are the crit avoidance you get per attunement, the cold penetration, you know, hide skin to get tanky, the attack speed, the rage decay, penetration, elemental penetration, and obviously the famous Beastmaster tax, you know, which gives you a lot of damage reduction thanks to Aspect of the Boar and Ursine Strength. Note to mention, don't underestimate this point in ambush, because every 5 seconds you get, you know, a bit of a buff of attack speed of 10%. You know, it's literally 1 point. Why not take it? You know, to get more Maelstorms. So a little tip there. For gameplay, again, you have the entire rotation, but it's pretty simple, right? You cause roar, you get your Maelstorms, you rampage towards the enemies, you maul, and then when you get enemies, you just swipe. It's very straightforward. There are some things that you can do to min-max your single target damage, but overall, pretty easy build to play. Again, you also have some advanced tips here if you want to maximize your mobility, etc. Okay, in terms of the gearing is also, you know, pretty straightforward. I'm going for this version for a staff. Sorry, the reason I'm going for a staff is because staffs can get increased elemental damage over time, and as you can see, if you manage to get a tier 7 of this, well, it rolls up to 700%. So yeah, basically a single weapon can give you 1000% increased damage, and I think that's better than just having a bit of attack speed on your weapon. You know, 1000% increased damage is a lot of damage. So again, very straightforward tanking. We're gonna be building strength, we're gonna be building attunement, we're gonna be building vitality, and we're gonna be building increased elemental damage over time. As you know, we get damage per point of strength thanks to Werber form, and we want to get 60 points of attunement on or to get our maelstrom damage. Again, you have a complete gear progression. The gear planner goes from double tier 5s, which are extremely easy to get, to double tier 5, which is going to be a bit more challenging, especially if you're a beginner. You know, it tells you exactly what to focus, where to get things, why to get things, etc. And you know, we're gonna go back all the way up to, you know, what exalted you should go for, what type of affixes would you like to seal, etc, etc. We also have recommendations for uniques, recommendations for idols, tips on how to find each item, why you're replacing what item with what items, you know, what to use on legendary potential in case you get something crazy. Again, a lot of these items here in the best in slot planner, they're kind of surreal. You're probably not gonna see this, but hey, it's just there in case it happens, in case you are the lucky one. Hey, we got you covered, you know. We min-max all of them. And a bit of a blessing section. Very important to get Grand Hanger of the Void pretty much, because it keeps spell leech, and otherwise the build kind of lacks with sustain a bit. But other than that, you know, pure classic defensive shred blessing that you go for every build. You know, make sure that you grab the magic spine blessings, the drop rate blessings that fit your needs. And again, you have some tips there. Again, for idols, you can get a lot of HP and crit avoidance. You can get elemental resistances when transformed. You can get, again, a lot of HP, resistances, and of course, Throne of Ambition, which grants you a lot of armor and a lot of damage, especially while bossing. Really, really good for this build, especially because it lacks a bit of single target. But Throne helps a lot. And you also have some generic tips that you can include. And to finalize the build, we have the build scaling. Again, you have all the information you ever would need here. It explains why everything, where everything is coming. Yeah, I mean, you basically have a complete breakdown of all the decisions here. And some generic tips too on how to approach the monolith, how to approach each of the dungeons, etc. Again, if you're playing with a party, this build is extremely powerful because it's fast. It can help your teammates because you can be a frontliner. There is minor adjustments you can do to your skill trees to help your teammates. For example, you know, let's just say you're playing with a spellcaster. Well, you might want to grab the points here that give ally damage, ally spell damage, for example. You know, you say, I don't want to do that much damage myself. I'm gonna buff my allies. You could do that. You know, you could spec Warcry a bit more supporty, you know, with the healing, etc. So again, really, really fun build. Works great as a solo play and as a party. Go try it out. It's really fun. And remember, if you have any rage sustain, you just need to make sure you are hitting enemies, or you could just like use the quality of life version of the build, but be aware that you will lose some damage. Again, thank you very much for watching this video, and if you have any questions, I'll be answering them in the comment section, or you can just read the entire reading guide, which I'm sure is gonna solve most of your questions. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.
Full close.
Hey guys, Postron here, and today I'll talk about last epoch, especially the recently released 0.9 multiplayer patch, and whether it's worth buying in its current state. Now, Last Epoch is a ARPG developed by 11th Hour Games, and it's currently in its kind of last patch before the actual release, so 0.9, and next up comes 1.0. It has been in development for quite a while now. As a little background, I've been playing this game for around about 1,000 hours spread out over the last, I would say, 4 years. And recently they definitely picked up steam. So with this patch, there's basically the new multiplayer release. A lot of people have been waiting for this. They don't want to play in single player. They want to have an economy. They want to play with their friends. And on that real quick, there has definitely been a little bit of a miscommunication here. Trade is not implemented yet. It will be in between 0.9 or 1.0. But right now you can play with your friends. And I guess having a game online finally also means that people can just cheat items in an editor. Now, this is not a sponsored video. This is basically just an opinion piece of what I've been seeing and what I've played myself. And as we all know, it's very subjective whether a game is good or bad. So just take that, as always, with a grain of salt. You can watch the video through my lens and then apply your own opinion over it. Before we get into what I like and dislike, real quickly, a class overview here, because that's pretty important for a lot of the RPG players. There's 5 classes you can choose from. Now, there's 5 classes in total, which each of them having a subclass that you can kind of choose at around about level 20. First up, we have the Acolyte, which as subclasses has the Necromancer or the Lich. Necromancer is your usual summoner, whereas Lich is more of like a poison and self-harm kind of build with like poison auras and reapers and stuff like that. We have the Primalist, which has pretty interesting classes. First up, the Beastmaster kind of revolves around having animal companions around you that mostly do the damage. We have Shaman, which is more of your elemental caster, and we have Druid, where you usually swap stances, so you transform yourself into another animal. We have the Mage, which has 2 subclasses right now, the Sorcerer and the Spellblade. One thing I want to mention, I guess, is there are right now 3 subclasses that are not released yet. They will be introduced with 1.0. So right now, for example, Rune Master or Warlock, and I think the third one was Falconer, are not playable. As for Mage, we have the Sorcerer here, which is your usual stereotypical caster, and you have the Spellblade, which is sort of like a hybrid build between attack and spell. And we have the Rogue, which currently also only has 2 subclasses. Number 1, the Blade Dancer, which is sort of like dagger style assassiny, and Marksman, which is more ranged and bow. Then we have the Sentinel, which is mostly your tanky melee class. You have Void Knight here, which goes more into sort of like replicating its own attack with like echoes. It's kind of weird. Then you have Forge Guard, which can summon, for example, weapons and armors, and is also kind of like fire-based. And then you have the Paladin, which is mostly like healing and defensive. Then we have the usual item system. As you can see it here, you have weapon, shield, body armor, helmet, all the good stuff with different, for example, legendaries, with magic items, rare items, you know them all. We're going to talk about them a little bit more. Something interesting is the idol system. These are basically items that you kind of have to like organize within this idol space. And this is a really interesting min-maxing factor, sort of how you actually fit them in here, what's the best combination. So that is also something that I really like that we're going to touch about a little bit later. As for skills, this game does not only have like skill slots, it also has full specialization for every single skill. That means your skills level up, but as well as that, you can also allocate passive points for your skills up to 20. So that is basically up to 5 skills that you can have specialized. And they are not just like your cookie cutter, a little bit of increased attack damage or whatever. That is obviously also in there, but there is stuff that can completely change the way a certain skill feels or plays, which keeps the game really fresh. But on top of that, you also have your passive skill. So there is a passive skill tree where you can allocate points per level as well. So skills level up, you level up, and whenever you level up, you can allocate points in here. These are your cookie cutter, basically passives that affect your character globally. For example, in the Sentinel class here, we start off in the Sentinel tree, and then once we have ascended into either Void Knight, Paladin, or Forge Guard, you can see here I mastered Paladin. That means I have access to the Paladin passive tree right here as well. Now, one cool thing about this is that even though I haven't mastered Forge Guard or Void Knight, I can still allocate points, however, only up till the half point. So all the juicy points after you can only get in the class that you mastered. Now, with the most cookie cutter stuff out of the way, I want to quickly talk about what I liked first. Number 1, this game is easy to learn, hard to master, which for me personally is the golden standard for a fun ARPG. Now, with something like Path of Exile, which is my main game, I love it to death, but it is definitely hard to learn, extremely hard to master, which basically has the outcome that people very much rely on content creators to kind of help them out at the start. It's very hard to get into. You can't just pick a skill randomly. This game is extremely forgivable when it comes to that. You might be thinking about, oh, maybe I need a build guide for my first character. You really don't. Of course, you're gonna have an advantage if you do, but it is definitely viable in this game to just pick a skill and play through the campaign with it. And obviously the results will vary, but you will not get stuck anytime soon. And you can always respec points easily. So even if you made mistakes during your progression, you can just redo that later. And I want to go into this a little bit more because this seems like kind of a no-brainer, but it's actually not that hard to do. Very often, if you want to make something accessible to more people, you have to water stuff down, but this game is still very, very intricate, and that mostly comes through its itemization, which we're going to go over next. Now, the itemization in this game is incredible. First up, I want to talk about the crafting real quick. The crafting is very, very bare bones. Every item has 2 prefixes and 2 suffixes for up to a total of 4 mods. And the way you make these items, let's for example say I just found this item, is simply with these shards right here. Now, you can, for example, just simply say, okay, there is an open prefix, mana is a prefix, I really want that mana. All you have to do is you have to craft it. You can add that affix at any time. Now, the way you achieve this is with forging potential. And down here, you can see this item has 34 forging potential. The more you craft onto this item, the less your forging potential will get, until you get to 0, at which point you cannot further craft the item. However, until then, you can basically do with the item whatever you want, which makes it easy to make decent items at least, and really, really hard to make good items. However, this means that it won't just be a lottery system until you get an item that's kind of like what you want, and then maybe you hit the jackpot and you're gonna get it. No. You can deterministically craft what you want. Now, there's a lot more to this. There's glyphs, there is runes that you can add to it. This system is really, really clever and really well made. However, this would not fit into this video as a whole. I just want to tell you that this crafting system is awesome. Now, what this crafting system incentivizes you to do, however, which is pretty clever, is magic and rare items are actually really valuable because you can't just craft these items from scratch. For example, if I wanted to get this item just to where it is right now, I would already be on, like, I don't know, 5 forging potential, and then it would be almost over. However, I just found this item and I'm like, okay, I want strength on it. So I picked the strength right here. I have Glyph of Hope, which is just makes it, I have more chance to lose less forging potential. Add the affix, there it is. Now I have strength on my item. And now I can increase the tier. And now there's different things here that would be a little bit too complex. But what I want to tell you is you find stuff on the ground and rares are actually valuable, which a lot of ARPGs struggle with. Usually when you have a crafting system, at some point it just takes over. You're just crafting it. Everything you find on the ground is just completely worthless. And that doesn't happen in this game also because there is exalted items. Now, for example, if you see here, this item is purple. What does that mean? You see this purple mod right here that says plus 260 armor. This is a mod that is above tier 5. So that the tiers of item mods usually go from tier 1 to tier 5, with tier 5 being the strongest. However, you can go further, tier 6 and tier 7, and you can only find these on the ground, which incentivizes you even more to just slay monsters instead of just crafting and doing nothing else. Another big thing that this game has is the unique and legendary system, which incentivizes you even more to kill monsters instead of just crafting in your hideout. It's actually valuable and you actually find good loot on the ground. Another thing is even magic items are valuable because of how the crafting system works. So these fragments right here, for example, the strength I just crafted, gets made by these affix shards. And the way you get these affix shards is either you find them on the ground, or what you can do as well is you can use the rune of shattering to destroy items and get those shards. Now, some of these shards are really easy to get. Some other shards extremely valuable. For example, +2 level, for example, you have +2 to rebuke, is incredibly hard to get, but you can get them on, for example, magic items. Magic items are usually like, they're 1 or 2 mod items. You wouldn't usually pick them up. You would just hide them on your loot filter or whatever. In this game, not, because if you find a magic item that has this mod right here, you can actually Rune of Shatter it and get that very valuable affix shards. And all of this, so let's shatter this real quick. As you can see here, I just got some shards. All of this plays together into an economy where magic items, rare items, and next up unique items are incredibly valuable even in endgame. With that said, let's talk about uniques real quickly. What happens in a lot of ARPGs is you have an economy where 99% of legendaries or uniques or whatever you call it are usually worthless when it comes to endgame gearing. Some are just good for leveling, some are good for nothing at all, and some are best in slot. However, Last Epoch handles this differently. There is legendaries and uniques. There's a difference between them. So an item starts at being a unique. So for example, the item I have right now is usually just the Bleeding Heart, and it has these kind of mods, right? However, as you can see right here, this is a little bit different. There's an additional mod on top in kind of this pink color. To explain what this pink color is, we have to talk about legendary potential. So as you can see here, Muramaha's Hilt, legendary potential 1 up there. What does this mean? Let me get to the left side again. What does this mean exactly? Well, this item used to have legendary potential 1. Now you can combine a unique with a exalted item, so one of these pink items, to form a legendary. And in this case, I combined it with another amulet that had 4 mods, and it randomly chose one mod of that item to get copied onto the unique, which means that you can make extremely strong legendary items. So basically you take a unique item, you combine it with a rare or exalted item, and you make something like this. And that can get pretty damn crazy. Now you might think, well, isn't this just like D3, where at some points you just need primal legendaries and all the normal legendaries are useless? Well, no. The way this system works is there is a effective level for legendary potential, and it's a little bit complicated. All you have to know is the lower this number is, the higher the chance that an item gets legendary potential. So basically what they do is they balance this out to where the weakest, or the leveling, for example, the leveling uniques, have the highest chance to get legendary potential, and all the incredibly strong items that are already strong are very unlikely to even get 1 legendary potential, right? Like an item like this could, for example, get 4 legendary potential, so it could get 4 additional mods. However, it's not like incredibly strong, so it would just kind of even the playing field between an item like this and some incredibly strong end game item. And what this kind of comes out to is an incredibly fun item hunt, where just because you see an item that you usually wouldn't consider doesn't mean that it's completely useless. For example, this item right here, probably not gonna get me to play a build with it. It only has 1 legendary potential, maybe it has 0. But if, for example, I got lucky and I got 3 legendary potential on it, wow, that is 3 extra stats that might be build defining. So yeah, so far, awesome, right? Rare items, itemization in general. However, the best thing about this game is the loot filter. First thing you have to know is items drop identified, which means it is possible to actually filter for mods in this game. So if you go to gameplay, down here, manage loot filters. You can basically add rules. You can make your own loot filter. There's rules for this. You can look this up in YouTube videos or probably figure it out yourself. But basically, you can craft your own loot filter. For example, you can say item type. You can say I'm fishing for a certain armor and it is a body armor, right? Then you confirm subtype. I want this to be exactly the augury plate because I really want that mana region, and you can even filter for certain mods on that item. So it is extremely deep. You can color it however you want. You can customize it, completely just kind of change how items are presented in this game. And this sort of thing is only possible because you can just search for mods on the ground. The items drop identified, so if an item has +2 to shield throw, which I really want, then it's going to show. I don't have to unID it with a scroll of wisdom or something before, and this kind of just feeds into an extremely fun gameplay loop. And then last but not least, let's talk about the end game systems that this game has. So you come out of the campaign, what are you going to do now? Well, right now there's 3 big activities that you can do. Number 1 is the monoliths, which is sort of like the Atlas in Path of Exile, kind of like your main way to play the game. And the way the game handles this is through these regions. These are called monoliths. Now, whenever you go to a monolith, for example, let's go to the Fall of the Outcasts. Each of these has a distinct boss with a distinct loot table. A lot of uniques, you can farm for them very easily. So you go to the monolith right here. You can choose normal. Now this you can unlock once you have completed all of the monoliths ones. You can actually go legendary and go area level 100. You can push corruption, which basically makes the areas harder and harder, but you get better loot. However, just as a baseline to kind of show you how this looks like, I choose the legendary right here. Now this is already a web of clusters that I've made. I think it starts down here. Yeah, this is where you start. This is basically what you would see at the start. So now all of these are areas that you have to conquer in order to, I don't know, unlock the next one. So whenever you pick on this, this is an echo, right? So it's basically just a map, and it gives you an enemy downside. So for example, in this case, enemies have increased movement, speed, and damage, blah, blah, blah. But you get rarity, you get experience, and there's certain echo rewards. So whenever you finish an echo, you get a fixed reward. Those can go from just crafting stuff all the way up to legendaries, and you can even farm certain legendaries. For example, there is certain monoliths that, for example, just focus on legendary helmets. So you can very much pinpoint to the items that you want. Whenever you complete an area, you can see up here, the screen here, you get stability. And whenever this stability is full, you can fight the boss. And when you fight the boss, what happens is you get a random boss unique, which can be either a common one or an extremely rare one. And what you get as well is a blessing. So if we look over here again, you can see right here, Fall of the Outcast, there is a blessing. So for example, here, this blessing gives me 22% increased unique drop rate. There's other stuff like experience, gold, and so on. A lot of these, however, are character-based. So for example, the Black Sun right here gives me increased leech rate. This is not just for this monolith, this is global. So unlocking these monoliths over and over again, you can actually customize your character. As an example right here, from Reign of the Dragons, I get 83% increased physical damage. From the Age of Winter, I get chance to shred enemy physical resistance. So the character customization basically never really stops. And if you do the hard monolith, the one I just showed you with level 100, these mods get even higher. And these blessings are random, which makes it so you're incentivized to complete the boss over and over, even if you already maybe have all the boss uniques. Next up, let's show you the dungeons. They need a key to enter. Now, if you right click, it will directly get you on the minimap towards where you have to travel. You travel there. The dungeon I'm going to show you right now is the one where I talked about the uniques and legendaries. You get extra mods on your uniques, blah, blah, blah. That is where you can get that, where you can acquire those extra mods. And this area is one of the most infamous bosses as well, which is called Julra, which we're not going to do right here. I'm just going to quickly show you how this works. We put in the dungeon key. Now, these you can farm in monoliths. They're not like common, but they're not also super rare, so you don't have to like save them or anything. There's different tiers right here. Since I just basically started this character, I'm only on tier 2, but this can go up to level 100, and at level 100 this is really rough to do in general. So there's just like different levels. Even if you just started out at level 55, you can already try it. Now, just to give you my opinion about these dungeons, I think they are absolutely awesome. They're a very, very fresh take on the whole genre. Love it. It kind of feels like raids almost. Currently, there are 3 different ones in the game, with hopefully more to come in the future. And then at the end, we have Arena. I'm not going to show this off. Everybody knows how this works. This is basically your greater rifts, basically where there's wave of enemies coming at you, and there's usually a leaderboard. I think right now they're disabled, but they're going to be up again, where you can kind of see, okay, this guy made it up to wave 400. This guy made it up to wave 403. So it's pretty cool. I usually find it pretty much a snooze fest, but if you like that, it's also in the game. All right, but enough praise. Let's talk about what I did not like about the game. A lot of these things have been in the game for a long time, so I'm not just nitpicking. These are things that have not been addressed until now, and I really hope they will. First up, I'm going to talk about the mana system. So the way mana works in Last Epoch is you basically have your mana globe right here, and it is a resource, right? As you can see here, my main skill, which is Hammer Throw, kind of like a Hammer Dim build, does not really take much mana, and that is because I kind of spec'd around it. In the skill nodes right here, there is certain things that makes it so your mana cost is lower, which is actually very interesting because this game does not have any mana flasks, which I think is a cool skill. That's a cool way to balance skills, right? You don't just cheese it with a mana flask and everything's fine, yada yada yada. That's cool. However, the problem comes when you have stuff that actually costs a lot of mana, because there aren't really good ways to increase your mana regen. Now, there are mana regeneration mods in the game. For example, right here, I get 27% increased mana regen. Now, the base is 8, and with this 27, I go up to 10. You might think that might make a difference, but it really doesn't. First off, these items only have 4 slots, so it's already very competitive what you want in there. A prefix, for example, where the mana regeneration is right here, I could get up to 60% increased damage, which I don't have because I just wanted the mana regen. Probably not going to need it later. In total, this doesn't do much. I go from 8 to 10 mana regen. But where it gets really bad is something like Mage. This is just an old Mage that doesn't really have anything spec'd into it, level 60. So right now I don't have much mana, but just know that Mage just kind of revolves around getting a lot of mana, either for defense or because there's certain abilities that get quadrupled in effect or tripled in effect if you have a certain mana threshold. So you're kind of incentivized to get a lot of mana. Now, what do you think happens to the mana regen, for example, if you go from 100 mana to 1000 mana? Well, the problem is nothing happens. To understand why this is a problem, let's quickly do the math. So let's say on our last character, we had 10 mana regen. All right, we have 10 mana regen, and let's say, because it's easier, we have 100 mana. That means that it takes 10 seconds to go from 0 to 100 mana back, right? Pretty easy. 100 divided by 10. All right. Now, if we had 1000 mana, which is what for example, Mage has, we'd have 1000 still divided by 10 because the base mana regen does not go up. That means for a Mage, it takes 100 seconds to go from 0 to full. What this means is that you're shoehorned into certain skills. There's certain skills that are just there to regain mana. For example, Focus, which is literally just you expand all your mana. Let's, for example, say, let's see if I can quickly figure out. Yeah, Meteor costs a lot, right? What this means is you have a skill that you press where you just stand there and regain your mana. That is your whole cycle. You do fun things, and then you have to stand there for a prolonged time. I can't even do it right now because I don't have cooldown on this. And then you would have to stand there and regain your mana. I don't have any problems with these skills, but the problem currently is there's no way to gain mana regeneration naturally. So this is going to be most of your playstyle. And the same can be true for certain rogues, because they have very expensive skills, and then they have certain auto attack like things where they just hit a few times and get a little bit of mana back up, which is fine on its own, but it just feels incredibly bad to play. I don't want to misrepresent this here. This is not all archetypes by any means, but it is in the game, and it currently makes certain classes a lot worse than others. And it also means that the best builds are usually the ones that don't use any mana at all, or that have some kind of cheesy way to get around that, because no efficient build just wants to stand there every 3 seconds and regain its mana. So making mana meaningful, really cool, but please give us more options. Now, another thing I absolutely hate in this game are layouts. This is just a little bit of stream footage from today. The layouts in this game are just so messy. There's so much backtracking if you go into the wrong direction. And do you see the direction arrow here? It can be completely confusing. In some layouts, it will literally show you there, but then there's like a wall there, and it doesn't take that into account, so you have to go all the way around. It is very obnoxious. It is incredibly obnoxious. I don't know how to describe it here. I don't want to go in depth about all the layout changes that I would make. In total, I just want to say that it feels like every single one of these is just a maze and just too damn long and too like convoluted. The quests are also quite repetitive in the monolith, which I don't mind too much, but in general, it's just, I don't know, very boring. Some of the layouts are just full of monsters, and some of the other layouts are just completely empty, and I just can shield rush through without killing anything. And the last thing that is not ironed out right now, surprise, surprise, is the multiplayer that just came out. Right now, it's quite unstable, especially if you're playing in a party. There's some rubber banding going on. Some movement skills aren't as smooth. Some skills get interrupted sometimes. It is definitely not perfect right now. As 2 people, it was still mostly fine. We had some lag, some weird desync issues. But when it came to 3 or more people, pretty damn rough. I would definitely say wait out a little bit more on that. There was kind of a debacle in the first few days where you couldn't log in at all. I think they mostly kind of made that work. Right now, there was like the biggest spike ever with 40,000 players, and mostly everything has been ironed out. So I don't think it has anything to do with how many people are there. Just the infrastructure wasn't perfect. I really hope they're going to iron out those bugs. But right now, multiplayer is a little rough. Well, this all culminates into the final question, which is it actually worth buying? Obviously, subjective. I would say yes, if you want a fun and engaging RPG. This game has a lot of fresh takes. It can definitely stand on its own. It is not a Diablo clone. It's not a Path of Exile clone. It is simply a very interesting take from a dev team that really cares. You can see this because the first thing they put out is all the systems. They were really good. In terms of graphics, it doesn't seem like they care as much. It became polished over time, but it was definitely rough at the start. They really care about the game itself and not just graphic beasts that want to push out something to appease a normal crowd and a normal audience. You can feel that they want to give ARPG veterans what they want, and that definitely shows. However, I would say don't buy it if you want to play it with friends or you need trade. Right now, if you want to play in a party, especially more than 2 people, it is going to be rough. You're going to have to be fine with bugs. If you're fine with that, totally get it, but it still does have the beta vibe for sure. Or if you need trade, trade is not out right now. There is going to be trade. Just in case you don't know, there has been an update post where they said they heard everybody and they're going to implement a very cool system that we're going to see probably over the coming months, but it's not in the game right now. So if this down here is you should definitely wait, just see how things go and kind of like put it on your wish list or your to-do list for later. If you're somebody like me who just wants a cool and engaging RPG experience, then you're definitely going to like this and you can basically buy it immediately. I will say this game feels in beta already better than a lot of games on release. But yeah, that's my take on Last Epoch. I'm gonna release a video about the handwritten video soon. Hope you could learn something. Maybe it could help you with my decision. And since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.
Okay, hello everybody, welcome to another video. So I just posted a video like a normal, which is actually kind of rare for me lately, an actual just, you know, standard upload, not going live or anything like that. I've just realized you guys can't hear the game here. where I talked a little bit about the big update, the big studio update. Why can't you hear Guild Wars 2? That's so strange. Is it because there's no noise?
Hey guys, Postron here, and today let's talk about the mastery changes for the passive tree in 3.21. Ever since masteries got introduced, they have been quite a big deal. They have helped the passive tree being a little bit more relevant, take away a little bit of the power from cluster jewels. The passive tree is strong again, and one of the reasons for that is that there's more stuff on the passive tree to get, and it's easier to get them with the mastery system. However, they made a lot of changes. Let's go through some of the most spicy ones. Also, this video is not made to tell you whether I like or dislike these changes. Overall, some of these added masteries are pretty goofy, but it is what we have. So yeah. First up, the accuracy mastery with plus 500 accuracy and then minus 2 per level. A lot of people were saying this is good while leveling. I mean, of course it is, but it isn't just good while leveling, it's just good in general. Even if we take a level 100 character, that's plus 300 accuracy, and a ton of people used to take this accuracy mastery right here, which gives you plus 3 accuracy per dexterity instead of plus 2, which means at 300 dexterity you would have the same effect as this, and not everybody has 300 dexterity. I think this is something a lot of people will take on their 1 accuracy cluster if they have one, especially now with precision not having the precision reservation mastery anymore, where they might have to consider just cutting it completely, but only time will tell. Number 2 here we have the 10% of armor also applies to chaos damage taken from hits. This is something I saw on Captain Lance's video. I completely missed this one the first time around. The reason this is really strong is because you can have up to 75% chaos resistance. So that means that the hit already gets reduced, and it's basically like unbreakable but for chaos damage, although it only takes 1 mastery. However, a big downside might be that a lot of chaos damage is actually not hit based, it is damage over time. But I think in any build that has a ton of armor, and if you can somehow get this in, it should be a no-brainer. Then actually on the same mastery, we have the 10% of physical damage from hits taken as chaos damage. If you're chaos inoculation, that is straight up 10% less physical damage taken. And a mastery that I absolutely love is this one right here, the armor and evasion mastery. Immune to bleeding if equipped helmet has higher armor than evasion. The poison stuff, not that important to me, but bleeding is really annoying, and especially while leveling. A lot of duelist and ranger builds are here at around about level 30, some even at level 15 or something like that. And the cool thing is, starting Act 4, there's really annoying bleed mobs that can destroy your day, and you don't want to upgrade your life flask every single time. So if you can just kind of balance this out where you just have an armor helmet, you're just bleed immune throughout the campaign, that is pretty awesome. Next up, probably the most talked about mastery of them all, gain adrenaline for 1 second when you change stance. I don't have to be the 20th content creator to make the same video about how OP this is. You can change stance every second, you can have perma adrenaline uptime. Adrenaline is OP. So what's the problem with this? It's the playstyle. There is no way to automate this that isn't against terms of service. So if you want to do this all day, then be my guest. I don't want to destroy my gameplay time. I would rather just not have it and have a little bit less power. A lot of people have been crying for this to get removed. I have to totally agree. It's just such a stupid idea, and it will just get people banned for no reason. I have no idea who approved this, who thought about this whole cooldown recovery stance stuff. I think it's completely silly. It's the most unhealthy way to play the game. But yeah. Then we have a pretty fun one that I just wanted to throw in here. 25% chance to open nearby chests when you cast a spell. Now, obviously kind of a meme, but first thing I want to know is, what does nearby mean? Because that's always a thing in PoE. And secondly, there is actually some map layouts, believe it or not, because nobody ever opens chests, but I actually saw this. In Volcano map and these like Karui layouts, there's actually a ton of chests. I'm not saying I'm gonna do that or something. I'm just, you know, I'm just pointing it out. Then we have 2 instant leech masteries right here. 10% from the leech mastery itself, and then also 10% of leech per equipped claw. Now, some people might be overrating these masteries. They're good, but they're not old Bob tech. Let me tell you why. So, unless the wiki is wrong on this, there's a 20% max leech per second. We all know this, but there is also 10% max per leech instance. So that means that if you hit something, no matter how big that hit is, it can only leech 10% of your life back. You can also test that in game by using the Bloodseeker Claw. That one has instant leech, but you're not going to fall on 1 hit. It doesn't work like that. So this is a restriction, and I don't know if you can actually scale this with any of the mods on the tree, because all the mods on the tree specify leech per second, and this is just per hit. So if that's true, and let's say you get a 10% instant leech from right here, that would mean you could maximum hit 1% of your life per hit. Is that bad? Not at all, right? That's still 50 life gain on hit on a 5,000 HP character. I just wanted to point this out because it's not old Valpak where you're just gonna leech and you're just gonna have this thing right here. Obviously, if you're a claw build, then this becomes even more interesting. Then the dagger mastery right here gives 50% projectile speed while you have a dagger. Doesn't sound like anything crazy, but 50% projectile speed, we haven't really seen that yet. That is a ton, right? Like, you can get a bit on the passive tree here or there, like 20 here, 20 there. If you take this full cluster, you can get a long shot, and this also gives 10%, right? But just 50% with 1 point, definitely gonna be a huge quality of life improvement for some builds. Maybe potentially dagger spark, probably not. I'm just saying. Then a pretty substantial buff to instackers right here. 1% increased evasion per 5 intelligence. Now, some instackers that care about defense, let's put it that way, have already done stuff like Shaper's Touch, where you get 2% increased evasion per 10 intelligence, which is the same as 1 per 5. So you're basically doubling the amount of evasion you get on that build. That is a lot. We're talking if you have like 2,500 intelligence divided by 5, you get 500% increased evasion just from this notable, and then you could get even more from Shaper's Touch for a total of 1,000. Then a mastery that everybody loves, the Tabby mastery, right? 50% increased maximum life if there are no life modifiers on equipped body armor. Obviously awesome while leveling, unless you frequently change your body armor. You should usually have something with some flat life, because especially early flat life is way better than increased life. However, this can get in handy, for example, when you start mapping and you have a tabula rasa. One thing that a lot of people are actually pointing out, Rastone does not work, unfortunately, because the last line here, strength provides no bonus to maximum life, is still considered a life mod. But this is going to be absolute best in slot, passive point for a lot of endgame builds. There's still a ton to do. Dendrobate, Yalas, the list goes. And we have the mastery right here that makes it so you count on low life while at 55% of maximum life or above. Very strong for basically every low life build. One thing I want to mention though is a lot of people are talking about Petrified Blood. Now, it does say low life in the first line, but listen to this. In the second line, it says 30% of life loss below half-life is prevented. So just so you know, as long as you're on 55%, you're still not going to get that less damage reduction on that extra 5% of health that you go over low life. Still really good, still best in slot, just saying. And then there's the counterpart to it, which is you count as on full life while at 90% of maximum life or above. The only really application I can see for this is make damage on full life a little bit more cozy. Not super excited about this one, but still something to point out. Something I am excited about is the Poison Mastery. So this used to be a Claw Mastery. Enemies poisoned by you cannot deal critical strikes. You would have to take this weird Claw Cluster that kind of works on poison, but it's very inefficient. You had to also be here. Now if you're a poison build, you basically just get this for free. Especially now with the removal of the 20% poison duration, you don't have that much else to take anyways. Now there's a ton of other ones to talk about, for example the recovery or the stun masteries, but a lot of these are really hard to actually understand how they function until we test them out in game. Other than that, I'm pretty stoked for this league in general. Yeah, since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time. Hey guys, Postron here, and today let's talk about the new Pathfinder, why I think it's completely insane, why I'm gonna league start Pathfinder, why you should maybe consider it as well. I'm kind of gonna go through it point by point. So after going through all the patch notes, basically I assumed that everybody just shared my opinion that Pathfinder was completely bonkers. We kind of theory crafted from the get-go. We looked at life flasks and how much regen you can get out of that. More on that later. But basically I was surprised to find that some people think that Pathfinder got nerfed for some reason, which is fine. We're just gonna go through it in this video one by one. There's a lot of new hype things to see here, and there's a reason why I swapped from Champion to now being Pathfinder on my League starter. Also more on that later. So last league, Pathfinder was basically the Ascendancy that you played to be super tanky endgame. What you did is you basically scaled elemental resistances with Topaz Flask, Sapphire Flask, and Ruby Flask. Then you had a lot of increased effect, Flask effect from the small nodes. And after you got Progenesis, it was basically over. You were just absurdly tanky. You saw this on multiple poison builds that kind of just wanted to be tanky, whether it's for Simu, whether they just don't like dying, whatever it is. However, there's actually a new way to play it, and this one is more interesting for me right now because it's actually league start viable, whereas Progenesis is going to be super expensive next league. Now everybody knows the gig is up, and just getting the right setup, getting the right flask mods everywhere is going to be pretty annoying. However, this new node, Master Surgeon, basically needs almost no support. Now, what does the new Master Surgeon do? Well, it has life flask effect are not removed when unreserved life is filled, and life flasks do not queue. Life flask doesn't queue basically means if you press a life flask twice, the next one is not going to start once the first one ends. It's just going to basically evaporate. But the first line basically means that your life flask sort of gets converted into a sort of life regeneration, which you already know from something like an enduring mana flask. Everybody who ever played a mana hungry build will probably have encountered this flask right here. It's going to fix your mana early, right? Basically, whenever you get to full HP or full mana, right? If it hits here, it still keeps pumping. It's kind of like a mana regen, not really a mana flask. Now, before we go into how life flasks actually work, as a baseline, without any increase to life flasks at all, I just want to quickly talk about the Divine Life Flask and the Eternal Life Flask because both have like an upside and downside. If you're using a saturated Divine Life Flask, then you'll get 502 life per second back over 5.2 seconds. So in total, it's like 2,800 or something throughout 5.2 seconds. Whereas with an Eternal Life Flask, you will get more life per second, but it won't last as long. And that is actually pretty important because you cannot automate life flasks. So you want to have it to a point where, for example, in my build, it's going to be like 7 seconds or something. You don't have to press it too often. But just to make you understand, this is the base value of like just a flask with no support. So quickly, a very important thing here is there are two stats that are important: amount recovered and recovery rate. Now, to make you understand what these different mods actually do, I made an example here. You have a life flask with a total duration of 10 seconds. Per second, you recover 100 for a total of 1,000 over those 10 seconds, right? So there is 3 things here: amount recovered, recovery rate, and flask effect duration. Amount recovered, if you had a 100% increase, so you double it, that is now 2,000 life for 10 seconds. Duration stays the same, but you get double the amount of life. Pretty easy. Gets a little bit more tricky with recovery rate. Recovery rate is actually not something you want that badly. If you have a 100% increased recovery rate, you get the same amount of life as you would have gotten over 10 seconds, but over 5 seconds. So it makes it faster. But that also means that you have to press your life flask more with the way the new Pathfinder works, which is super annoying, right? The thing that you actually want is flask effect duration. If you have 100% increased flask effect duration, you get 2,000 life. Once again, this one right here, but over 20 seconds. So what do you want to get? Most likely you want to get increased amount recovered from your life flask, and then you want to have a combination of increased recovery rate and flask effect duration. If you think about poison, for example, you kind of want to have a good combination of poison duration and faster poison. It's pretty similar here. You don't want it to be too fast because otherwise it's going to be really annoying. You're going to have like a 3-second life flask, and you're going to see a lot of people who are going to inflate their regen that way. If you actually want to play a build like this, you probably would rather have, I don't know, 2,000 or 3,000 regen per second, and you only have to press once every 8 seconds instead of having to press every 2 seconds. That just sounds absolutely gnarly. Let's talk about investment. On this build that I'm going to show you, which has 19,668 regen over 7.24 seconds, what I have is these nodes here, which I would take anyways. It's very efficient life. I have these nodes right here, which help me a lot out because I'm a Pathfinder, basically having perma uptime on flasks, and I'm taking this wheel here with the increased life recovery and flask duration, field medicine. That is basically it. Later, you can also invest into a Watcher's Eye with increased life recovery from flasks, and also herbalism, which you would also take anyways. What I have here is this right here. So that is, if we do the math, 19,668 68 divided by 7.24, we're looking at 2,716 life regen per second. Now, if we did the same thing but on an Eternal Life Flask, what would happen is the duration goes down, so you have to press it more often. You kind of have to have better flask sustain. But what you would get then is, catch this, 16,873 divided by 4.18. We would be looking at 4,036 life regen per second. And I want to emphasize this. This is no medium clusters, no high investment. This is literally the passive trait and 1 Watcher's Eye mod, right? Without the Watcher's Eye mod, you would probably be like 2.1, 2.2k, and here around about 3.5k. Okay, so let's talk about this example right here. Let's take the first flask. Now, obviously, it's annoying to press a flask every 4 seconds. You could probably do it on Pathfinder with some investment, but we're talking no investment. Divine Flask is going to be realistic. In 7.24 seconds, you can easily get those 15 flask charges back. So you get 2,716 regen per second. What does that mean percentage-wise on a normal character, let's say, with 4.5k life? Well, it's pretty easy. We just do 2,716 divided by 4,500. So this kind of life regen is akin to 60% life regen per second. Now, I don't need to tell you this if you ever played RF in your life or any regen-based build, but that is absolutely insane. Now, having to scrounge by and just get these like small amounts of life regen over the tree, right, halving everywhere, or trying to cheese it somehow, like even back in the day, Inquisitor is nowhere near this power level, right? Like we're talking absolute insanity. We're gonna talk about more about this down the video because there is way more to this. But this kind of regen is just completely unheard of. Now, next up, let's talk about Petrified Blood. Here's where it gets a little bit saucy because we have Petrified Blood, which is usually used in low life builds, right? But in this case, you don't have to be low life to use it. I'll explain why. Life recovery other than flasks cannot recover life to above low life. So why do people do Petrified Blood? Why do they go low life? Most of the time, it's because of Pain Attunement, get the 30% more damage. On attack-based builds, it's probably Bloodthirst or some other reason, right? It could be whatever. But the reason it's so broken in this build is because you don't have to go low life. We have no reason to go low life, and still Petrified Blood is insane. Look at our effective hit pool with and without. It gives us an extra 13k. It's completely busted, and that is because life recovery from flasks still applies. So what does that mean? That means we can be on full life, have our full life HP pool, and still get the damage reduction from Petrified Blood. Now, explaining Petrified Blood in this video would be too long. I just want to give you the TLDR, sort of. If this is your HP pool, what Petrified Blood does is below the half-life mark right here, all this HP is worth more, sorta, because whenever you take damage below 50%, you're going to take reduced damage by almost half, but then you get a lot of degen on top of that. The degen doesn't matter on this build because we have so much regeneration, but the big thing about it is we can still get above 50%. So where, for example, a build with normal life regen or a build with leech could not get over 50%, that is the downside of Petrified Blood, we can still get full HP because we have that flask recovery. Because we're technically life regen, but not really. It's in reality, it's a flask that acts as life regen, right? So that means that this right here, you can go to full HP and still use Petrified Blood. Now, this HP up top is not worth as much. Once you get into this category right here, you're gonna get all the damage reduction from Petrified Blood. I might hear some people say, what about one-shots? Now, you don't have to be on low life whenever a hit happens. You just have to go into low life territory. So what does that mean? For example, if an enemy hits you for a, let's say he hits you exactly for this 100% of your HP. Well, we don't die because below this mark, all the damage that would happen here gets almost halved. Once again, not going to do the whole math here. It's too much and too complicated for one video. Just know that Petrified Blood is absolutely amazing on Pathfinders right now. Next up, let's talk about recovery in general. Life recovery is probably one of the most underrated things in this game, which is weird, right? Because everybody knows how strong Inquisitor is. But what I hear a lot, especially when I talked about going Pathfinder over Champion, is what about the max hit? So max hit is an incredibly important stat, especially in hardcore. What it basically means is that if an enemy hits you for this amount, it can kill you with your current defensive setup. So for example, if an enemy hit me with 22,465 physical damage, I would be dead even if I was at full HP. But in reality, if you don't have the life recovery after a hit that you take to go back to full in time, it won't matter. You're not going to be at max health. You're going to be the next hit comes in, you're at 60% HP. Well, the Fizz max hit doesn't really matter at that point. So recovery is incredibly important. And that is something that you just have to learn. You will see that some characters that seem very squishy, that have insane recovery, right, are just a lot tankier than you think they are. And that's because you usually don't actually get one shot. What actually happens is there's a few hits in between. You just don't see them. Unfortunately, there's no death recap in PoE, so you don't really notice. But you will notice once you play one of these builds. Now, Pathfinder obviously has a ton of defensive options as well, with Flask Effect, with Progenesis. So that is not an issue. I just wanted to point out just how crucial recovery is. Now, then there's two more things that are really interesting with the new Master Surgeon, which is Hardened Scars. First up, this is a anoint only notable, and basically it gives you increased life flask recovery which is awesome, perfect for the build. But then it also gives you 25% less damage over time taken during any flask effect. That is a ton of damage reduction. Now, is it actually going to be as insane as I think it is? Maybe not, because damage over time usually doesn't matter as much if you have this crazy amount of regen. But still, just for 1 point or for 1 anoint, it seems completely busted. And then we have a very interesting one at the end here, which is Replica Sora of the Divine. The life recovery from flasks also applies to Energy Shield. There's also a belt that does this. Basically, the downside here is that you have Eldritch Battery, which means that your Energy Shield is going to be over your mana, which means you will have to be like Mind over Matter or something like that. Also very interesting. This is something to min-max for like late game builds. I'm currently in like League Starter mode, so I don't really care about it too much, but this just seems completely bonkers. As you can see, if you get on top of 4,000 life regen, also 4,000 energy shield regen, there is going to be something broken you can do with this. At the end here, let's also talk about the other nodes that got reworked. First up, Nature's Reprisal, which is incredible now. I know a lot of people have kind of been talking about it got nerfed. You don't get the 30% AoE anymore. I just want to remind you that Balance of Terra is not going to be in the game anymore. You don't just get free Wither anymore. And for all the people who like had a spell totem in their setup where they're like, oh, I'm always at 15 Wither stacks or something. No, you're not. Your totem is going to die constantly. It's not really up while mapping. This is just absolutely incredible. 50% increased effective Withered is even better. Also now, because Corruption got nerfed only to 20%. All the builds that had to use Withering Touch support now don't have to use it anymore, and they get 50% increased effective Withered, which is around about 25% more damage straight up. So yeah, this node just got buffed like crazy. Master Distiller is just kind of a meme. I don't think this is good. It's too much like recovery that you need. And I'm sure there's going to be people who do some nasty stuff with Master Alchemist. So the TLDR for Pathfinder right now, especially for League Start, is you get 2,000 to 6,000 life regen per second. This is high investment. This is basically no investment. I'm not trolling. Check the numbers yourself. Perma flasks, you will have perma flasks with like 6 to 7 points invested, and you also have poison and thought support. The poison node is untouched. Obviously, poison got nerfed. I'm not really interested in poison right now, but it's still super solid. And then you also have Nature's Reprisal, which is a huge buff. Now, as for what I'll be league starting, it will be the Toxic Rain Ballista, but it will be Pathfinder. Now, basically, I wanted to go Champion, and I was pretty sure that if Champion doesn't get nerfed, it's just going to be, it has to be Champion, right? But after looking at just how crazy the recovery from Pathfinder is and how insanely you can scale it into endgame with Progenesis later, I cannot, like, you even get a ton of like movement speed from Pathfinder with like Silver Flask scaling, with Quicksilver scaling. Wilma's Requital double dips on the Silver Flask. It's just an absolute mess. It just kind of has to be Pathfinder at this point. Now, if you want to follow my champion, for example, you want to play a duelist next, totally understandable. You still can do that. I won't be putting out a guide for it, but you can basically refer to my old build video. I'll link it below in the description, but I will be going Pathfinder. As for my timetable, the full Toxic Rain Ballista build will be out on Monday, followed by, on Tuesday, we're going to do a full leveling rundown. So it's basically going to me show you everything from level 0 to the end of the campaign. Then on Wednesday, we have the endgame guide, where I basically scale it from like, I don't know, 5-6 divines up to 100. Then we have first day. I'll give you guys some updates on EA and also Caustic Arrow. And right before the league starts, I'll also give some updates on Q&A, whatever was the most asked questions. I'll answer them right here. And as for live streaming on Monday, we're going to do practice runs. So if you want to check that out, be there. We're going to do probably 2 or something like that. We're going to try out 2 different routes, going to see what's better, so we can then make the Toxic Rain leveling guide that's going to be the best. On Tuesday, we're going to kind of min-max Toxic Rain, so we can then release the endgame guide. And on Wednesday, Thursdays, I will basically look over some POBs of you guys that you cooked up. We're going to look at some Saboteur. It looks pretty spicy. And on Friday, we're just going to go into the release. So yeah, I can't wait for Toxic Rain Ballista. I can't wait for League Start. Try out the new league. I'm going to make more videos about this. But right now, I also have to update Max Roll and all of that stuff. So yeah, until then, since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.
Welcome to the WAN Show.
Welcome to the end of this year's Muniz March Madness, a series where we look at film and television shows featuring Frankie Muniz. And this year so far, we've looked at a total of... We've only made one video. But hey, at least it was about 2 movies, am I right? Today, for our finale though, I have something special for you. A movie that really made being blue cool before James Cameron would make every dollar that ever exists with his Avatar franchise. Big Fat Liar. Some of you are probably watching this video as just another video. Maybe some that are a bit excited to talk about the movie, but there's one person out there that is more excited than any of you that this video has finally come to fruition. For nearly 2 years now, there has been one person so dedicated to me making this video, holding out hope when times seem dark, that maybe, just one day, Jordan Fringe will finally talk about Big Fat Liar. And for that I say, Anthony, this one's for you, buddy. How funny would it be if this whole video and the purpose of me talking about this film was just a big fat lie in itself? Especially with April Fools around this time as well. Well, lucky for you, I don't celebrate April Fools. And I hope you all enjoy this video on such a classic 2000s Frankie Muniz moment. But I hope Anthony enjoys the video just a bit more than anyone.
You are lying through your teeth, you little demon.
Big Fat Liar. Man, it feels so weird to finally say that title. Now, Frankie Muniz was on the rise at this time in history for both film and television, being the...
Going to get some big. Okay, changed it last night. I think we'll call a stream. I'll be on tomorrow anyway, though. It was going to be just a bit chill stream. big host. But I'm just gonna leave it there. Go and head to bed.